Happy Father's Day and welcome to That Church Online. I'm Jess and I'm glad you're tuning in with us today. We have a very special Father's Day message planned for you today. 4 of our pastors are going to be sharing personal stories from their childhood and I can't wait for you to hear it. Also, our senior pastor, Scott Harness, is going to wrap it up at the end with some valuable life lessons that you can take with you no matter where you are in your walk in life. We hope that you enjoy and stay tuned. I'll be back at the end to wrap us up.
My dad was a rough, tough, outdoorsy kind of man. He smelled like aftershave, beer, and cigarette smoke. In today's time, such a cushy culture, he would have been disliked by the crowd, but he didn't care. He didn't like the crowd either. My dad didn't care about what anyone else thought or thought about him. He lived his life his way under his will. He was a tough man. He worked hard, he provided, and he protected. Dad built the house I grew up in with his own hands. Dad could build a motor for a car, he could lay bricks, he could wire a house. Dad was the kind of guy that just knew stuff.
I will tell you this.
I'm having a moment.
He loves waiting on arrows to dry. It's my favorite part.
Are you sweating yet?
Not bad.
No, me neither.
You?
Oh yeah, I felt like I sprung a word.
I remember a time when I was riding my three-wheeler and a guy stopped me because I was on the property that belonged to an excavation company. The guy thought that I'd tipped over the outhouses that were there. I hadn't, but he thought I had. And so he told me that he was going to kick my, Before he got to me, I sped off straight home. Dad was in the yard working on something, and I just told him. I said, Dad, listen, this guy said he's going to beat me up over here because he thought I tipped over the outhouses. Immediately, Dad jumped in his truck and he told me to get in and we sped off in that old Chevy, kicking up gravel. We lived on a pothole-filled gravel road. Dad drove straight to where the men were. There were 3 of them now. They were all standing there just hanging out. Dad jumped out of the truck and got in the face of the one guy that threatened me.
1, 2, 3.
Dad was a lineman. He worked for a utility company. He was dark from the sun and strong, like gorilla strong. He wore shirts with the sleeves cut out. He had a few tattoos and scars from a history of tough moments. Dad had been in jail on more than one occasion. That's for real. Dad could skin a buck, he could run a trot line, and he for sure was a country boy that could survive. When Dad stepped into that guy's face and said, I heard you want to beat up my son, that dude lost all color and the ability to speak plainly. He stuttered and denied and hem-hawed, and Dad said, well, is it so or not? And Dad stepped closer to him. Now he's chest to chest with this guy, looking him straight in the eye, and he said, that's my son, and if you got a problem with him, you got a problem with me. He said, you got a problem with me? And the guy said, no, sir, I don't. Dad finished by saying, that's probably good for you. He got back in the truck and looked out the window at the guy, and he told him, he said, hey, the next time you see that boy riding his three-wheeler over here, you look the other way. Dad didn't say a word on the ride back home. He didn't say anything, and I was kind of too afraid to say anything myself. We just drove off from there and drove up at the house. He got out of the truck and went back to work on the stuff that he was doing before. That was my dad. My dad was far from perfect. He certainly wasn't a spiritual leader, and he didn't understand the Bible, and he didn't tell me or teach me anything like that. But he did work hard. Now, he did drink beer and he smoked cigarettes, especially those with no filter. Dad lived his life the way he was going to live his life. I used to be so critical of my dad. So critical. But the truth is, I wouldn't be the man that I am today if it wasn't for him. I've come to realize that being a father and being a dad, just having one, is more important than not having one. One of the greatest needs I believe in all of our lives is a dad. How important it is. I'm not really sure that we can even quantify the effect a dad has on their kid's life. My verse that really stands out to me when I begin to think about what dads do and the importance of their role is Psalms 127:4, and God says it this way. He said, like arrows are in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth.
To know my dad, you need to know a little bit about what he's been through. From a very young age, my dad and his 3 brothers went from orphanage to foster home and then back to orphanage. Whenever he was 18, he came to Arkansas and met my mother and her family, and for the first time in his whole life, he saw what a family looked like. Now skip ahead to my 6th grade year. My parents gathered me, my brother, and my sister up, and unfortunately, it was a talk a lot of kids have to hear. They were getting a divorce. A lot of things went through my head. Why? This is unfair. What did I do? Dad, you finally have a family, and you're going to screw it up. There was one thing that he said, and it still sticks out today. He says that he loves us, and that he was going to be there for us. Whenever the conversation ended, I thought about his past and thought he might just do what his dad did. This statistic at the time was that 1 in 4 kids live their lives without a father figure. I was scared to be the one. But I wasn't. Almost every day he picked me up from school. He fed me, made sure that I had clothes, made sure that I had lunch money. Every baseball game, he was at the very top in the bleachers, there supporting me. I had a show choir concert one time, and I told him not to come because that was just an easy way to get made fun of in the Gill House, but he came. When I graduated, he was there. When I had my seizure, he was there. He was the first one there. And when I got married, he was there. He was always there. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave," an action.
Look at my hat. Look at my hat.
God loved us so much that he came to earth and gave his life for us. My father, he loved me so much that he made sure to always be there for me.
I think it'll go in there. It will.
I mean, maybe. You know what I think? I think that'll ricochet off the ground as good as anything.
I think it'll bounce right, if anything.
A verse that I'm reminded of is Psalm 68, verse 5. It says this, "A father of the fatherless and a judge of the widows is God in his holy habitation." I think that sentence alone means that God's favorite place to be is a father to the fatherless. You see, as I'm reminded all the time what a father is supposed to symbolize, it's a man in your life that is to cherish you, teach you, coach you, laugh with you, and ultimately lead you onto a path that leads to Christ.
Yeah.
That's all right. Okay, let me think about that. Pop that battery out in my little hand. I may have one of those.
You see, for me, I recognize that I was provided with an earthly father who wasn't prepared to take on that role fully, to fulfill the responsibilities of a title such as dad. Am I hurt by that? Obviously, I was. But it wasn't until a certain point in my life, and I say it was, because the God I serve, trust, and believe is in
Ben, which way did it go?
always my favor.
In the area.
Just a little off.
It's okay. It was really close.
He's good and always provides where we lack. I could have spent a lot of time frustrated, angry, mad, and worrying, and would have been useless. Why? Because throughout Jesus' ministry, he says, "Fear not." You see, I prayed and prayed and prayed that my dad would be involved in my life from the get-go. And I can count on one hand the encounters I've had with my dad, all at random stages in my life, from taking me to get my ears pierced to teaching me how to shoot a basketball one time, from different sports games, and the list may go to a short number of things. But you see, the things that I know about my dad is he's strong, determined, and he's obviously hard-headed. But what I've been told, he's smart and could achieve anything that he shot for. Although I may not have been taught and led by him directly, I've learned a very valuable lesson from him in my life. And that lesson is to know what I don't want to do or be. You see, for me, I always thought that I was praying for the wrong things, but in reality, until I opened my eyes, I realized that he did answer in the most perfect way in the most perfect time. Especially in every season of my life, all the major moments of my life, learning how to play sports, navigating high school, how to date girls, what hard work means, how to fish and how to hunt, how to build things and fix things, understanding how to work to be a better husband every day, and being a dad. You see, there's many dads that God placed in my life to be what I didn't have, so I knew what I needed to know. You see, through the father figures that God has placed in my life, I never went without. I'm a dad now that didn't have a dad, that is aiming to show my kids what one looks like.
it's that thing about people. My old man. Most of the stories and memories that I have with my dad are times when we're out hunting or fishing. It's something we love to do together. And I remember one particular time that we were in a thicket and we were hunting ducks. And Dad would always lean over and be like, Kendall, look, and still does to this day. He's like, Kendall, look. And when he says that, something's usually wrong. It's like, Kendall, look, we're out of gas and we're gonna have to paddle back. Or Kendall, look, we're something and something's going horribly wrong. And this particular duck hunt, we were low on shells. And so Dad says, he looks at me and he says, Kendall, we're gonna have to be selective. Be selective, and that basically means, hey, don't take shots unless you kind of have to, because we don't have a lot of shots to take. And I remember one duck flew in, and so Dad stood up. So I'm like, okay, in my mind, I'm like, be selective, don't shoot. He's gonna get it. It's one duck, and it flies in, and Dad shoots, and I hear the first shot, and bang. Second shot, bang. And I'm like, okay, at this point, the duck's it's out of range. It's too far.
You're right on it, that's it.
And as soon as I say in my mind it's too far, I hear bang, third shot. I'm like, what happened to selective? And Dad looks at me, and that duck flew away, by the way. He won't tell you that part of the story, but it did. And he looks at me and he says, Kendall, sometimes if it's worth the first one, it's still worth the third one. So I figure if I sent the first one, I'm gonna send the third one too. And so, and all throughout my life, my dad has taught me that. It's just, if it's worth the first one, it's worth the third one. And I think that in life, there's times we don't want to underestimate the power of a full send, of just being like, man, when God tells you to do something, to commit fully, that's what God told you to do. And my dad has not only taught me that, he's modeled that in my life. And it reminds me of a story in Mark chapter 2 and verse 4. It's these 4 buddies, and they have a 5th buddy, but he's crippled. And they go, hey, look, this guy can be healed if he can just make it to Jesus. Jesus is here. He's healing people everywhere. If we can just get him to Jesus, he'll get healed. And in the story, you hear him bring this guy to Jesus, and the house is completely full of people. There's no room. You can't get in. And sure enough, these 4 guys are like, hey, man, look, there's no way we can get in this house. And one of the guys has an idea. He looks at the rest of the guys and he's like, hey, let's tear a hole in the roof. And there's got to be this moment where you look at this guy, you're like, what on earth? What was Timothy thinking? You've then lost your mind. But at the same time, Timothy didn't underestimate what God can do when we live fully surrendered to him. He stepped up and said, hey, let's rip a hole in the roof. Let's do it. If God said it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And so there's times in our lives where we just need to fully commit. And that's what my dad has taught me, is to fully commit to what God has told you to do.
Psalms 127:4 says, like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. I don't know that any, simple sentence could contain so many good parenting advices that you find from Psalms 127. It's a powerful, powerful statement. I love what it says. This is like arrows in the hands of a warrior. And one of the things that stands out to me, and I think this is so important, as I've had a chance to today unpack the different stories of dads among our pastors. And I think about it and I think, you know what? One of the main things is proximity. A child needs to be in proximity to their dad. Being a dad is a hands-on job. It's an effort that we have to be close to them. It doesn't matter whether you're raising daughters or raising sons. It doesn't matter. They need their dad close to them. And that's exactly what's magnified in Psalms 127, is they have to be in our hands. We have to be teaching them. We have to be having conversations with them. I don't know how many children's lives have been influenced and impacted and changed. I don't even know how you could even follow it. That's just been impacted by the conversations that they get to have with their dad. The other thing that this verse says that I think stands out is that they're in the hands of a warrior. A warrior knows who he's fighting for and what he's fighting for. You know, I think we have an identity crisis among our dads in our community. And what's bad is that when I have an identity crisis, I pass on a broken identity to my children. It's important for us as dads to know what it is that we're living for and who we're living for and why we're living. It's critically important for me to know who I answer to and why. You know, as I pull out the Word of God so often, it recenters my life. Why? Because it teaches me who it is that calls the shots in my life. Dad, you need that. You need to know what it is that you're living for. You need to know who you're living for, and you need to share that with your kids. They need to know that their dad is a warrior. Whether it's a little girl who's trying to figure out what her identity might be in this world, and in a world that says, hey, it's all about beauty, it's all about sexuality, it's all about the way your skin looks. You need to share with her, you know what? No, it's way more than that. You are a masterpiece created in Christ Jesus for this incredible work that God has given you to do. Or this young boy who thinks that, hey, you know what? The only reason I exist and the only value that I have is for me to perform. I'm gonna shoot the ball, or I'm gonna do a great job, or maybe even score a high score on a spelling test. The truth is that our little boys are way more valuable than the things that they produce with their life. And we're sending young women and young men into the world because our identity's broken. We're sending them into the world believing that, you know what, I'm only valuable if. Jesus established 2,000 years ago, you are valuable because, not if. And Dad, you need to have that in your mind, and you need to be passing that on to your kids. You are a warrior. You need to know who you're answering to and why you're fighting and what you're fighting for. The other that I love in this verse says this. It says, so are children of one's youth. Now, Psalms 127 goes on and tells us that when we raise our kids in a certain way and we're talking to the enemy in the gate, we don't have to be ashamed or afraid. I love that. And so what Psalms 127 is saying, that there's this process of raising up our children, that if we make the right investment in our youth and in their youth, in that season that we can invest in them, that later in life, there's going to be a reward for it. I want to emphasize this. The investment that you can make in your kids' lives and how you make that investment is for a limited time offer. You can't do it all the time. What you need to be doing in your kids' lives when they're 2 months old is not the same thing you're going to do when they're 20. You can't. It's going to be different. What you can do in your kid's life when he or she is a teenager is not going to be the same thing that you're going to be able to do in their life when they're married and have children. There is a season for us to invest in our kids. And dads, I want you to think about that. It's important for you to know what role that you play in your kids' lives right now. I figure some of us are probably sitting here going, you know what, I've wasted some time. And some of us are probably going to walk away feeling some level of guilt. Here's what I want you to do. I want to challenge you to know this. You have an opportunity right now to make an investment in your kids' lives. And let me say this, maybe your kids aren't young anymore, maybe they're older, but you still have a role in their life. You know, moreover, there's other kids that you can make an investment in. There is a world that we live in that has a deficit of dads. We need dads to step up. Here's the beautiful verse again. Psalms 127:4 says, like arrows in the hands, proximity, close to our kids, arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. When we make an investment in our kids at the right time, there's nothing more rewarding than being able to see their life bear fruit and see them live in certain ways, committed to Jesus, committed to the cause and purpose of Christ. There's nothing more rewarding than that. I don't care what it is that you're chasing right now. I don't care if it's a career, 6 figures in income, diplomas, title deeds. Nothing will compare to the investment that you can make in your kids as a dad. We need to elevate the office of fatherhood. And I hope today, as you've heard these stories, that you will join me as you think about these things. It has caused me to examine the dad that I am. And maybe you do the same thing. You know, with God's help, with the grace of Jesus, you and I can be everything that God's called us to be. It's overwhelming sometimes being a dad, but here's what I want you to remember. The one who makes us a father is the ultimate and perfect father, and He fills us with His Spirit, and He calls us to do something absolutely incredible. I pray this Father's Day you're encouraged and strengthened as you consider what it looks like to be a dad to some pretty incredible kids. I pray that God blesses you during this time, and I pray that you leave this place encouraged. God bless you.
Welcome back. We hope that you enjoyed today's Father's Day message and that you can apply this in your life. If at any time you'd like to connect with us, you can text the word connected to 21000, and someone from our staff will be in touch with you this week to answer any questions about what you've seen or heard. We're going to take the time now to continue worshiping God through our tithes and our offerings, and we've set it up really simple for you online. You can actually text your dollar amount and the word online to 84321. It's going to send you a link to go ahead and set up that process for online giving. You guys, it's been a great day, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your Father's Day. We'll see you next week.